lab is going to be an interesting one for a lot of people. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this. They all do. Here's the deal. I'm going to let out the little secret of the big truth. The big truth of perfectionism in the business world. A lot of folks may have difficulty with that concept, that perfectionism is not about having high standards. A lot of people think it is. It is looking at a different angle. And that angle, it is believing that your worth depends on meeting the impossible standards. When we look at mastery and excellence, and I look to the Japanese for this, in a healthy way, in a healthy format, when we look at excellence, it's where can I adapt it? Where can I improve and adapt? So maladaptive perfectionism, when we look at the word mal as in malicious or malintent, it has negative connotations, bad or wrong. Mal could be bad or wrong in some people's eyes. Malicious, negative. Right? Adaptive perfectionism is healthier because you improve and adapt. The excellence and mastery looks at what can I do to improve, where the perfectionism, that is a completely different question. And that question is, how can I avoid being seen as not enough? Because it's all about appearance and how I look, right? Now, going away from maladaptive and adaptive, we also have outcome and process. And this is where I come in, because I've coached dozens of people for the past 30 years, and we have outcome and process. Outcome thinking is like, I'll be happy when I reach it. I'll be happy when I get there. Or I'm thinking of hitting the target. The targets are important to have, but people give them more weight and volume than they actually deserve. So the reality of life is that outcomes and being outcome focused, they're influenced by many things that are outside of your control. So for example, if in archery, if I shoot an arrow, the wind is a factor. It may not hit the target because of the way the wind is moving. And those outcomes are influencing things that are outside of your control. So you can control your preparation. You can control your effort, your stance, the process itself, and the decisions that you make. You can't control every outcome. Welcome to Control Freak City, basically. Now, when we get down into process thinking is the archer. It's not the target. Outcome thinking is the target. Process thinking is the archer. And the archer has to worry about the stance, the position, the aim, the functionality, basics of good archery. And he has to be able to be in the moment. He's not in the future. He's not in the past. He aims it. He understands what he has to do. He has to worry about his stance. He's in the process of archery. He's doing. He's not thinking. See, outcome focus can be the worst thing for an overthinker. The worst. Because I got to hit the target. I got to hit the target. I got to hit. What about the process? What about doing the work? Being in the process, holding the bow, aiming, letting it go, right? When we look at it, some people have that belief of my job is to improve the process every day. And that's what I do. But you do have to have a level of contentment inside you. Like you have to have contentment with who you are. You have to accept who you are and understand where you want to go and then make the efforts to take you there. All right. Your job is to improve the process every day, but you have to be content with who you are. If you're constantly saying, I'm not good enough, then every effort you make will be connected back to your self-esteem. You have to be able to separate those results from your self-esteem. Very important. Some people don't know how to do that. So when you are outcome focused, that's target focused. It's great. Salespeople do it all the time. And I've seen them rip each other apart and turn into a revolving door, and people get fired left and right as a result. I've seen it. Okay, I've seen it. When we look at reality, reality is focusing on the actual process of what you're doing. Your job is to improve the process. Reality is good processes increase your probability of success, because we can now go from maladaptive perfectionism to adaptive. Let's adapt. That's it. So when people obsess over the target and the outcome, that's usually what hurts their actual process. They got their brain in the future, the overthinking of 20 steps ahead, and they're not focused on the results that they have to do in the moment, in the actual moment. So when we get into maladaptive perfectionism, people say, well, my value depends on the performance, whether or not I hit the target. And that's happening to a lot of folks in the younger generation. My heart goes out to each and every one of you. Because people will say, if I fail, people will reject who I am. If you're resting, that's lazy. I've seen that before. I must earn my worth. People say that. And in physical fitness, we see it also, like rest is laziness. We see that as well. You know, David Goggins, I like David Goggins, and I'm not going to speak negative of him at all, but he might think rest is laziness. To him, it is, because his window of tolerance is so big. And he's trying to teach other human beings to stretch that window of tolerance. Got it? So in sports, rest isn't laziness. Rest is part of your recovery. And that's important. That is crucial. When your window of tolerance gets bigger, then you can take less rest. But you have to gauge that for yourself, because his journey, David Goggins' journey, is not your journey. Your journey is not his. You need to understand that. I love the guy. David, if you're watching, rock on. Keep doing what you're doing. When people say I have to hit the target, otherwise I'm not earning my worth. So what happens? What happens with the typical behaviors that come out, right? Well, people overthink the target. They procrastinate. They shake with the bow and arrow. They shake with it. It's like, I don't know. Should I do it now? Should I do it now? There's constant comparison, upward comparison. There's a lot of upward comparison. Let me compare myself to someone who's better, rather than looking at somebody next to me and say, what results can I borrow? I'm going to borrow their data, not their life, not their achievements. I'm not going to compare myself to someone else who's higher. I'm going to say, what information do they have? What strategies do they have? What mindset do they have? Borrow the data, and then you can apply it. And it happens in business as well. And some people who can't take feedback, their self-esteem gets hurt very easily. But why? It's because they attach their results to their self-esteem. You have to learn to separate the results from you. It happened to me. I used to be a screenwriter, and I meant screenwriting was writing. If writing was good, people liked it. That was the equation I made. So if someone didn't like one of my scripts, then my brain says, they didn't like it, I must be bad. Not thinking that there's a million different opinions from a million different people, and that everybody was going to tell you something different. and it has this objective, subjective entire journey behind it. So it's interesting. So that constant comparison, borrow their data. And if you are going to be perfect all the time, or if you're aiming for 100% all the time, you're going to get burnt out. You're going to get burnt out. It's going to happen. It might happen to you. Just look at any athlete. Tell yourself realistically, like if any athlete in the world was always operating at 100% all the time, every day, that means there would be no recovery. That's where the logic breaks down. There would be no recovery, no rest, no days off, none of that. None of that. There's no starting over. There's no tomorrow. There's none of that, right? We buy into that overperformance. What about celebrating a win? You go, you throw a baseball. It has a little bit of a curve to it. You go back, you adapt, and you throw it again. Because you used the data. You used the info. That's where it gets good. And you're waiting for the perfect moment. When we have long-term outcomes that are down the road, that's where people get stressed out. People get anxiety when they have to reach an outcome in 3 months and all they can do is think about it for 3 months. High stress. Satisfaction goes down, opportunities are lost, and there's very little joy because they're constantly obsessing about a long-term outcome. But when we look at adaptive mastery, I'll call it adaptive mastery, adaptive excellence. My work can improve daily. I know a Japanese doctor I follow online. He says, if I did 0.1% every day for an entire year, what would my life look like at the end of the year? And it's an amazing mentality. 0.1 is so minor, but he's doing it because it compounds. The feedback you get in business from your customers are going to help you accelerate your growth. Finished and complete does beat perfect. And if it's version 1 and you have the option for version 2, then great. Your worth isn't tied to your performance. And if you do, you're going to hurt yourself a lot. So in business, what do? Well, we ship product out. We learn from the customers. We improve the areas of the business. That's why I love like business process improvement, because I love looking at the big map and be like, all right, what really needs it? What needs it? And then we repeat, and just do it over and over again. So the long-term outcomes, you can become more confident, more momentum, more mastery with it. Now, what tends to happen with some people, even if you're an entrepreneur, you can have this experience, is shame versus guilt in perfectionism. This is one of the biggest distinctions. People just over their head. When we look at the guilt, we'll say, I did something wrong. Uh-oh. But not realizing your behavior can change. People have difficulty separating certain things. Shame tells you, I'm wrong. Versus guilt says, I did something wrong. It's more action-based, right? Where shame says, I am wrong. I am a screw-up. I am this. And we start to blame ourselves. So what happens is the identity starts to feel that shame. Guilt is paying attention to the actions that you actually do. But where shame comes in is it's rooted in the past. Guilt is too, but shame, they could have been ridiculed as a child. An adult could have criticized them, and as a result of that criticism, their mind has adopted that self-talk into their subconscious mind. And now they act out. So basically, you're now an adult, and your mindset has been assumed from the very parent or authority that criticized you the most. So when they feel shamed, they feel like there's an attack on them. Now, shame creates a lot of perfectionism, a lot of it, because your brain starts to make, like our human brains make shortcuts. We have schemas, and our brains make shortcuts and schemas, and a mistake equals rejection. That's the shortcut. And if it's a rejection, I don't feel comfortable. All right. Therefore, never make a mistake, because perfection becomes an emotional armor to protect them. That's why. So it's not about success, but it is about how they protect their self-esteem and protect who they are. And if you criticize them really hard, they might snap at you. They really do. They might. It's not that they want to, but they get triggered. Their brain goes back to when they were 5 and they were getting ridiculed. Basically what happens. So the truth of it is that really no amount of achievement heals shame. We see this happen in sports a lot. I mean, temporarily, your brain might say, okay, I made it. But then the next challenge that you have in front of you will just bring back that same feeling again. Now, you have to be able to move through your feelings. Like, we have to separate identity from behavior. The identity of who you are from the behavior of what you do. That's really hard for a lot of human beings. People say, I failed. We say, no, that attempt failed. That's the difference. You're not your latest result because you're an ongoing process. And people say, oh, what's wrong with me? Look and say, what happened? Let's look at the facts of what happened. Let's borrow the info. That's where you get curious. Curiosity opens learning. Judgment shuts it down. Got it? So it's very important to know that. Mistakes get a lot of shame in society, especially from the hyper-perfectionistic public. Every expert has a history of bad work. Mastery is built from correcting mistakes, not avoiding them, but correcting them. So what happens is we have to expose that rule because everybody has an impossible rule. The perfectionist has an impossible rule. I must never fail. I must know everything. I must impress everyone. I have to be seen a certain way. I must always be productive in business. Ask yourself, could anyone actually live like this forever? More often than not, the answer is no. And we have to separate that worth from performance. Your performance is changing every day. Your worth doesn't. One is a variable, adjustable. The other one is a constant. Right? So self-respect is just as important as self-esteem because self-esteem depends on winning for some people, but self-respect depends on keeping the promises to yourself because your identity updates based on what you do. So one survives and the other doesn't. That's it. Focus on the evidence of what you're doing. So the key truths today, and I'm going to wrap it up because we're over on time, is perfection is a fantasy. Excellence and mastery is a practice, and this is what the Japanese teach in martial arts. Progress beats that, beats perfection. Consistency moves past that intensity. Being finished is amazing because it creates feedback, right? And rest is part of your performance. It's part of the process. Be in that process because the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to not be perfect. The goal is to become better than you were yesterday. That's all I'm